A cab should cost less than $40, my son said, placing 2 folded bills on the plastic chair beside my hospital bed. If it costs more, that's not my problem. For a moment, I thought the medication had made me misunderstand him. I was 63 years old, 3 hours removed from a cardiac procedure, and still wearing a paper wristband with fall risk printed in red. The discharge nurse had said I could not drive. She had also said an adult needed to stay with me until morning. Jason had nodded through every instruction while scrolling on his phone. Then the nurse left, and my only son set down 2 20s as if he were tipping a waiter he did not intend to see again. "You told them I was coming home with you," I said. Jason zipped his jacket. "Plans changed." "What plans?" His eyes moved toward the door instead of meeting mine. "Melissa needs me. The movers are at your place, and she can't handle everything alone." The room seemed to tilt, although I was sitting still. "What movers?" He picked up my wallet from the counter and handed it to me. My driver's license and insurance card were inside. My debit card and 2 credit cards were gone. "We'll talk when you're settled," he said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Then he walked out of St. Catherine Medical Center, leaving me with $40, an empty house key ring, and the first clear understanding I had experienced in months. My name is Thomas Hale. For 36 years, I repaired pumps, valves, and emergency generators at the Westbrook Municipal Water Plant. When machinery failed at 2 in the morning, I was the man they called because I did not panic and I did not guess. I listened for the wrong vibration, found the broken part, and fixed what could be fixed. Yet when the failure was inside my own family, I had spent years explaining away every warning sound. Jason was 39. He had my dark hair, his mother's quick smile, and a talent for making his worst decisions sound temporary. His contracting business had been 1 job away from stability for nearly 8 years. I had lent him money for payroll, guaranteed the loan on his work truck, and let him and Melissa move into my house after their landlord refused to renew their lease. Every rescue had come with the same promise: just until we get back on our feet. Carol, my wife, used to say that help without a boundary eventually becomes permission. She died 4 years before that afternoon, and after she was gone, I kept helping because saying no to Jason felt too much like losing another piece of my family. 6 months before my hospital visit, I began having dizzy spells. Jason offered to organize my bills. Melissa put my banking applications on her tablet because the screen was larger. When Jason asked me to sign a temporary medical authorization, I did. I told myself it was practical. I told myself he was stepping up. That was how I had become the kind of man whose son could take his cards, change his locks, and leave him in a hospital with 2 20s. I reached for the call button, then stopped. Shame is a strange thing. Jason had abandoned me, but my first instinct was still to protect him from the opinion of a nurse I barely knew. I pictured myself explaining that the responsible adult on my discharge form had simply driven away. I imagined the careful concern on her face and the social worker who might come next. At 63, I was more frightened of being pitied than of being stranded. I lowered my feet to the floor. My legs held, though they trembled. The doctor had entered through my wrist rather than my groin, and the bandage beneath my cuff was tight and clean. I could walk. I could think. I could call somebody. The problem was that Jason had spent 2 years making himself the center of my world. Old friends stopped inviting me places after I canceled too many times to watch his dog, meet a subcontractor, or cover a payment. My sister lived in Arizona and had health problems of her own. My granddaughter Sophie had not spoken to me in almost 11 months, for reasons I believed I understood then and would later learn I did not understand at all. I tried my debit card through the hospital's payment application. Declined. I tried to sign into my bank account. The password had been changed. That was when a voice beside the curtain said, "If you tell them he left you, they may not discharge you tonight." I looked toward the doorway. An old woman sat in a wheelchair in the hall, a plaid coat folded over her narrow shoulders. Her white hair had been pinned into a neat twist, and her hands rested on a black cane as if it were a judge's gavel. She had the delicate skin of someone well into her 90s, but her gray eyes were sharp. "Excuse me?" I asked. "Your son," she said. "The one who took your cards." Heat climbed into my face. "You heard that?" So did half the corridor. The other half was pretending not to. She rolled closer with short, practiced pushes of her feet. A hospital envelope lay on her lap. I noticed the same red fall wristband around her wrist. "I'm sorry you had to hear it," I said. "I'm sorry you had to live it." She studied me for a moment. "Can you stand without falling?" "I believe so." "Can you lie without becoming theatrical?" I stared at her. She leaned nearer and lowered her voice. "Pretend to be my grandson." I would have laughed if my chest had not been sore. "Ma'am, I'm 63, and I am 94. People believe whatever supports the story they have already chosen." Before I could ask what story she meant, a man in a camel-colored overcoat turned the corner. He was in his mid-50s, silver at the temples, carrying a leather folder and the impatient expression of a person who expected doors to open before he touched them. The woman's fingers tightened around her cane. "That is Grant," she whispered. "My late husband's nephew. He told the staff he was taking me to Hawthorne Memory Care. I told the staff I was going home. He has been waiting for me to become tired enough to stop arguing." "Why would they release you to him if you refused?" "They will not. But he enjoys creating the appearance of inevitability." She nodded at my hospital bracelet. "Your son appears to have the same hobby." Grant saw us and quickened his pace. "Eleanor, there you are. I've been speaking with admissions. We need to leave before traffic." The woman lifted her chin. "Thomas, darling, you found me." I did not know how she knew my first name until I remembered the label on my discharge envelope. Grant's gaze moved from her to me. I had never been good at lying. Carol could tell when I had bought her a birthday gift because I became overly interested in ordinary conversation. But what Eleanor had asked from me did not feel like a lie so much as a position that needed filling. I stepped into the hall and placed one hand on the back of her wheelchair. "Sorry I took so long, Grandma. The pharmacy line was terrible." Grant's confidence flickered. "And you are?" "Thomas." "Thomas what?" "The person taking her home?" Eleanor's mouth twitched at one corner. Grant opened his folder. "Mrs. Whitcomb has had a fall. Her physician agrees that she requires supervised care. My physician advised me not to climb the cellar stairs while carrying a basket of canning jars," Eleanor said. "He did not advise me to surrender my home to a man who has already requested a developer's survey." "This is exactly what I mean," Grant said to me. "Confusion. Paranoia. She thinks everyone is after her property." "Are you?" I asked. His smile vanished. "This is a private family matter." Then it should be easy to respect her answer. A nurse approached, pushing a second wheelchair. Grant turned toward her with the smoothness of a practiced salesman. "I'm Grant Fowler, Mrs. Whitcomb's authorized family contact. Hawthorne is expecting us." The nurse checked the chart. "Mrs. Whitcomb has not consented to a transfer, Mr. Fowler. She arranged transportation through the county senior service." "She canceled it." "No, I did not," Eleanor said. Grant produced his phone. "I have messages that demonstrate she has been forgetful and unsafe." The nurse's voice remained calm. "You can discuss that with her physician or the probate court. It does not change today's discharge." Grant looked at me again, perhaps trying to decide whether I was a threat or merely an inconvenience. "Eleanor has no grandson named Thomas." "Families are complicated," I said. "You have no idea how complicated." He closed the folder with a soft snap. "Be careful, whoever you are. She makes promises when she wants attention." Eleanor's shoulders stiffened. The sentence had hurt her, which seemed to please him. He bent toward her. "When this ends badly, Hawthorne may not have a room left." "Then I shall try very hard to survive the disappointment," she said. Grant walked away, already dialing somebody. Only when he disappeared around the corner did Eleanor release a slow breath. "You are a better liar than you think." I didn't enjoy it. "That is what made you convincing." The nurse looked between us. "Mr. Hale, are you Mrs. Whitcomb's family?" I opened my mouth, but Eleanor answered first. "No, he is a man who needed a ride, and I am a woman with an extra seat." The nurse's eyes softened, though her tone stayed professional. "Thank you for clarifying." I felt exposed and strangely relieved. Eleanor had used the lie only as long as she needed it. She did not ask me to sign anything or speak to a doctor. She simply told the truth once the threat had passed. The nurse turned to me. "Your discharge contact left?" "Yes." "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" I looked at the 220s on the chair. "I'm working on that." Eleanor tapped her cane against the floor. "The county car is taking me to Whitcomb Nursery. It passes within 3 miles of Westbrook. He may ride with me, and my housekeeper can watch him until morning if his son has misplaced his conscience permanently. I can't impose, I said. You can, and you will. I owe you one alarming nephew. The nurse made us wait while she called the transportation service and confirmed that an additional discharged passenger was allowed. She also made me speak with a social worker who helped me freeze my credit cards and gave me a number for adult protective services. I nearly refused the pamphlet. The words, financial exploitation of older adults, looked too severe for what Jason had done. Then I remembered my missing cards and the movers at my house, and I put the pamphlet in my pocket. The county car was a white minivan driven by a retired school custodian who greeted Eleanor like an old friend. She sat behind him, and I took the other captain's chair. As the hospital slid away through rain-streaked glass, I expected relief. Instead, I felt the delayed force of humiliation. My son had not lost his temper. He had not received an emergency call. He had planned to leave me. He had brought exactly $40. Eleanor did not fill the silence with comfort. She watched strip malls and wet intersections pass for nearly 10 minutes before asking, "Do you own your house?" "Yes." "In your own name?" "In a living trust. My wife arranged it when she became ill." Eleanor turned from the window. "Who is successor trustee?" "Jason, after I'm unable to serve." "And who decides that you are unable?" The question made my mouth dry. "I don't remember." "Then remember before he does it for you." I took out my phone. There were 3 new messages from Jason. The first read, "I told the nurse you changed your mind about staying with us." The second read, "Your house isn't safe after what happened. Don't go there tonight." The third arrived while I was looking at the others. "We moved your important things. The rest can be handled after closing." I read the last word twice. "Closing," I said aloud. Eleanor held out her hand. I passed her the phone. She read the messages without changing expression, then gave it back. "Call him," she said. "Put it on speaker. Do not tell him where you are." Jason answered after one ring. "Dad? Where are you?" "What, closing?" There was a pause. I heard Melissa speaking in the background, too low to understand. "This is not the time," Jason said. "It became the time when you left me in a hospital." "I didn't leave you. You refused to cooperate." Eleanor raised one eyebrow. "You put $40 on a chair and walked away. Because every conversation turns into a fight. We've been trying to help you for months. You wander. You forget appointments. You nearly burned the kitchen." A towel touched the burner because Melissa moved it. "You see? You blame everyone else." My pulse quickened, and the ache in my chest frightened me. Eleanor placed 2 fingers against her wrist and looked at me until I matched my breathing to hers. "What did you close on?" I asked. "We accepted an offer on the house." "You cannot accept an offer on my house. As successor trustee, I can act when you're medically unable." The rain against the van seemed suddenly louder. "I am not medically unable. Dad, you were in the hospital because you collapsed at breakfast. I had an irregular heartbeat. The doctor treated it. That does not make you trustee." Melissa's voice became clearer. "Ask him who he's with." Jason lowered his voice. "Where are you? Who declared me unable?" "We have documentation." "From whom?" "Come to Hawthorne tomorrow and we'll explain everything." Melissa found a private room. "It's already paid through the end of the month." Eleanor's face hardened at the name. "With what money?" I asked. "Your money. For your care." The old fear rose inside me. The fear that if I pushed too hard, Jason would walk out of my life completely. Then I looked at the empty spaces in my wallet and understood that he had already walked out. He had simply tried to take my house with him. "Cancel the sale," I said. "You are upset and medicated. Cancel it. I'm not going to let you ruin the only responsible plan we've made." The call ended. I sat with the phone against my palm until the screen went dark. "How much is the house worth?" Eleanor asked. "Maybe $460,000. I bought it for $92. Carol and I paid it off 11 years ago." "Does your son owe money?" "Most people do." That was not my question. I thought of the work truck I had guaranteed, the invoices Jason kept on the dining table, the time Melissa cried because a supplier was suing them. "Yes." "Then tomorrow morning we go to the county recorder." "We?" "I worked there for 41 years, first as a clerk, then as chief title examiner. Grant calls that ancient history whenever it becomes inconvenient." She rested both hands on her cane. "A house cannot be." Stolen with a single piece of paper, Thomas. It takes several people deciding not to ask the next question. We are going to ask every question. Whitcomb Nursery stood at the edge of Bellwether Township, where new subdivisions gave way to open fields. A faded wooden sign hung between two stone pillars. Beyond it, rows of bare fruit trees followed the slope toward a large white farmhouse. Greenhouses glowed softly in the rain. It was not an estate in the way people use that word on television. The driveway had cracks, one gutter sagged, and an old red tractor slept beneath a lean-to. But the land had the settled dignity of something cared for across generations. The driver stopped beside a ramp leading to the back porch. A gray-haired housekeeper met us with an umbrella, but Eleanor waved away fussing and introduced me only as a friend from the hospital. There was no performance now. Inside, the kitchen smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Eleanor insisted I eat soup while she called her physician to confirm her follow-up visit. She let the housekeeper hear every instruction, then asked for the medication list to be placed beside her chair. She was careful in a way that did not look fearful. I began to understand that she had been documenting her own competence because somebody was building a story that said she had none. "Grant wants this land," she said after the housekeeper went upstairs. "A developer offered $3.2 million last spring. I declined. 2 weeks later, Grant began finding examples of my confusion. "Are you confused?" she smiled. "Every day. I walked into the pantry last Tuesday and forgot what I wanted. Yesterday I called the pharmacy and used my dentist's name. I also remember every parcel number on this road and exactly which trust owns your home, if your wife filed where I suspect she did. Human beings are not either perfect or incompetent. That is a distinction greedy relatives dislike. Why does Grant believe he can sell your land? Because my daughter is dead, my grandson is dead, and my husband's family believes proximity is the same as devotion. Grant has power of attorney for limited business matters. He has been trying to turn limited into everything." Her words made me think of the form Jason had brought after my dizzy spells. It was 3 pages, maybe 4. I remembered signing at the kitchen counter while Melissa pointed to yellow tabs. I had not read every line. Eleanor saw my expression. "What did you sign?" "I don't know." "That is an honest answer. Tomorrow we replace it with a better one." She led me to a small guest cottage behind the greenhouse. It had a narrow bed, a bathroom, and a bookshelf filled with gardening manuals. Fresh towels waited on a chair. I tried to offer her one of the 20s. "Keep your fortune," she said. "You may need breakfast." When she turned to leave, I asked the question that had followed me from the hospital. "Why did you choose me?" Eleanor looked back. "Because I heard your son tell you that your survival was an inconvenience, and you still thanked the nurse who brought your shoes. Cruel people reveal themselves by how they treat weakness. So do decent people." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and called my bank's fraud number. The representative asked questions to verify my identity, then told me there had been 6 transfers in the previous 5 months. The total was $83,400. My throat closed. To whom? "The destination account is registered to Hale Residential Solutions, Jason's company. I did not authorize those transfers." The representative froze online access and opened an investigation. When she asked whether a trusted family member might have had my password, I looked through the cottage window at rain shining on the greenhouse roof. "Yes," I said, "my son." That was the first time I spoke the truth without softening it. I slept in pieces. Each time I woke, I saw a different version of Jason at a different age. Jason at 7, waiting for me outside the water plant with a paper bag lunch Carol had packed. Jason at 14, pretending not to cry when I taught him to change a tire. Jason at 26, placing Sophie in my arms and telling me he finally understood what a father felt. Those memories did not become false because of what he had done. That was the difficulty. The person who betrayed me had not replaced the boy I loved. He had grown from him. At 6 in the morning, I received an email from a real estate transaction service. It said my electronic signature was still required on final disclosures for the sale of 118 Willow Lane. The proposed closing date was 9 days away. The buyer was Horizon Oak Holdings, and the purchase price was $390,000, at least $60,000 below the home's likely value. I opened the attached summary. The seller was listed as Jason Hale, successor trustee of the Hale Family Living Trust. A note said the property required substantial remediation and an expedited closing. I thought of the oak floors Carol and I had refinished by hand, the new roof I had installed 2 years after she died, and the rose bed she had planted outside the kitchen window. Substantial remediation was not a description. It was an excuse for the discount. The buyer's mailing address was a post office box. I searched the company name and found it had been formed 11 weeks earlier. Its registered agent shared an office suite with the accountant Jason used for his business. By 7, I was dressed and waiting in Eleanor's kitchen. She entered with her walker, inspected the bandage on my wrist, and told me I looked terrible. "You look remarkably pleased about that," I said. "I am pleased you are upright. Looking terrible is permitted." I showed her the email. She read it twice. "Did you sign anything electronically yesterday?" "No." "Good. Forward this to yourself at a new email address and print it. Never depend on continued access to an account someone else knows exists." She had already placed a yellow legal pad on the table. Across the top, she had written 4 headings: property, bank, medical, witnesses. Beneath each heading were questions. "You did this before breakfast?" I asked. At my age, waking up is an administrative achievement. I like to use the extra time. The county recorder's office opened at 8:30. Eleanor refused a wheelchair and entered with her cane, greeting the security guard by name. The office had moved to a newer building after her retirement, but 2 clerks still knew her. She did not ask them for favors. She directed me to a public computer and made me search the records myself. The trust deed from Carol and me appeared first. We had transferred the house into the Hale Family Living Trust 8 years earlier. I was current trustee. Jason became successor only after my death, written resignation or incapacity certified in the manner defined by the trust. The second document had been recorded 2 days before my procedure. It was a certificate of successor trusteeship signed by Jason. Attached was a statement on medical office letterhead declaring that I suffered progressive cognitive impairment, rendering him unable to manage financial affairs. The signature at the bottom belonged, supposedly, to Dr. Alan Reeves, my primary physician. I knew it was false before I read the date. Dr. Reeves had seen me for an annual physical 3 weeks earlier. He had teased me because I remembered my cholesterol numbers better than he did. We had never discussed cognitive impairment. Eleanor pointed to the notarization. "Do you recognize that name?" I did. The notary was Melissa's cousin. She worked from home preparing insurance claims and had attended Thanksgiving dinner at my house. "One physician's statement may not be enough," Eleanor said. "The trust language will tell us. Do you have a copy?" "In the filing cabinet in my den, if they haven't moved it." The clerk printed the recorded documents. Eleanor asked for the statutory form used to dispute a fraudulent filing, then looked up 3 additional records. Horizon Oak Holdings had recorded no purchases yet, but a financing statement showed it had applied for a loan secured by my property. The lender had not funded it. There was still time. "We need a lawyer before noon," Eleanor said. "I can't pay a lawyer. My accounts are frozen. The county has an elder law clinic. I'm 63, not 83. And you were discharged after cardiac treatment, subjected to suspected financial exploitation, and threatened with institutional placement. Eligibility is not a beauty contest," she called Nora Ellis from the parking lot. Nora had once represented a nursery employee whose daughter was misusing her pension. She agreed to meet us at 11 if I could bring identification and every document we had. Before that meeting, I wanted to see my house. Eleanor objected. My discharge instructions said to rest, and Jason's messages suggested confrontation. I promised to remain in the car if anyone was there. She told me promises made by frightened men were poor security, then called the same county driver who had collected us from the hospital. The front door of 118 Willow Lane was open when we arrived. A moving truck stood in the driveway. 2 men carried my dining table down the front steps while Melissa directed them from the porch. I had imagined that seeing the house would make me angry. Instead, I felt an emptiness so complete that for several seconds I could not open the van door. The brass house numbers were the ones Carol had chosen. A blue ceramic pot she painted sat cracked beside the garage. Through the open door, I saw pale rectangles where our photographs had hung. Eleanor put her hand over mine. Her fingers were light, but her grip was firm. "Name 5 things you can see," she said. "What? 5 things?" I looked through the windshield. the moving truck, the maple tree, Melissa's car, the porch light, Carol's flower pot. 4 things you can feel: the seat, my shoes, your hand, the bandage. Good, now decide, stay or go. Stay. I stepped out before she could argue. Melissa saw me and froze. She was 37, carefully dressed even for a move, with her blonde hair pulled into a smooth ponytail. For years she had greeted me with hugs and called me Dad when she wanted something. That morning, she held a roll of packing tape like a weapon. "You're supposed to be at Hawthorne," she said. "I'm supposed to be in my house." The movers looked at each other. I walked to the bottom of the porch steps but did not climb them. "Stop loading," I told them. "I own this property, and I did not authorize this move." Melissa's face tightened. "Jason is successor trustee. We have paperwork." "The paperwork is fraudulent." One mover set down a box. "Ma'am, we need to pause until this is sorted." "No, you don't," Melissa said. "He's confused. My husband has medical authority." Eleanor had come up beside me. "Medical authority does not convey title." Melissa looked her over. "Who are you?" "Someone who reads before she signs." Jason's truck turned onto the street. He parked at an angle behind the moving van and climbed out before the engine stopped. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Taking possession of my home." He strode toward me. "You need to sit down. You had a heart procedure yesterday." "Then why did you leave me?" The movers were watching. A neighbor had opened her front door across the street. Jason lowered his voice. "Because you were being impossible. I knew the hospital would find a ride." "You told them you were my ride." "I had a closing deadline." There it was. Not an apology. A deadline. "Who signed Dr. Reeves's name?" I asked. Jason's eyes shifted toward Melissa. The movement lasted less than a second, but it answered me. "He gave us a statement," Jason said. "I called his office. He is calling me back." I had not called yet. The lie came easily this time because it was only a few hours ahead of the truth. Melissa folded her arms. "This woman is upsetting you. We should call the police." "Please do," Eleanor said. "Ask for the financial crimes unit if they have somebody awake." Jason came closer. "Dad, I'm trying to save what's left. My company had a temporary cash problem. The house is too much for you. We found a good facility. After the sale, the debt gets paid, your care gets covered, and everyone can breathe." "Your debt?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "The business supports this family. My home is not your business. You said it would be mine one day, after I died. Why should we all drown while you sit on an empty house?" The sentence silenced even Melissa. My son was not confused. He did not believe the house belonged to him legally. He believed it belonged to him morally because he expected to inherit it, and my continued need for it had become an obstacle. "You transferred $83,000 from my savings," I said. He looked genuinely startled that I knew. "That was a loan. I did not agree to it. You told me to do whatever was necessary. To pay the utilities, not your payroll. It's all family money." "No," I said. "It was Carol's insurance money and my retirement savings." At the mention of his mother, something changed in his face. For one hopeful second, I thought shame had reached him. Then he said, "Mom would have wanted me to keep my company." I moved before I had made a decision. Not toward him, but up the porch stairs and into the house. The living room had been stripped almost bare. Boxes labeled "Donate" lined the wall. On top of one sat the wooden case containing the precision tools I received at retirement. Another box held Carol's cookbooks, their pages crowded with her handwriting. I opened the cabinet beside the fireplace where we kept family photographs. Empty. "Where are the pictures?" I asked. Melissa came through the door behind me. "Storage." "Which storage?" "Jason has the information." I entered my den. The filing cabinet was gone. My desktop computer was gone. In the wastebasket lay the torn corner of a photograph. I pulled it out. Sophie's face looked back at me from her college graduation picture. Why was this in the trash? Melissa's expression became guarded. It must have fallen. The rest of the photograph was torn away. "She doesn't speak to any of us, Thomas. Keeping shrines doesn't change that." I looked at the woman I had welcomed into my family for 15 years. "Get out of my house. You cannot order me." "I can, and I just did." Jason entered. "Dad, don't start." The movers stop. "You and Melissa leave. You return my cards, my computer, my files, and every box you removed. If you do not, I report them stolen." His face reddened. "You're choosing a stranger over your own son." "I am choosing the truth over the man who abandoned me." He looked past me toward Eleanor, who stood in the doorway with both hands on her cane. Grant's warning returned to me. She makes promises when she wants attention. Jason seemed to reach the same conclusion. "What did she promise you?" he asked. "Money? This house she lives in? You think some lonely old woman is going to adopt you?" Eleanor answered before I could. "Thomas has not asked me for a dime. Can you say the same?" Jason took out his phone. "I'm calling the police. He's under the influence of medication, and she removed him from the hospital." "I left through the front door after a lawful discharge," I said. "Call them." He hesitated. "Police would create a record. A record could lead to questions about the deed." The moving company supervisor arrived 20 minutes later and canceled the job after I showed my identification and the original trust deed on the county website. Jason and Melissa left only when I repeated that I would call the police. Jason pointed at Eleanor from the driveway. "When she takes everything you have, don't come to me." "You already took everything you could reach," I said. The front door closed behind him. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I leaned against the wall because my knees would not hold. The house was cold and unfamiliar without its furniture. Eleanor made me sit on a box while she checked my pulse. "Do you have your medication?" she asked. I searched the plastic hospital bag. The prescription bottle was missing. Jason said he would pick it up, I remembered. Eleanor called the pharmacy. It had been filled but not collected. The pharmacist transferred it to a location near the elder law clinic. We locked the house using an old backdoor key hidden in the garage, though I knew Jason could still enter. Before leaving, I photographed every room, every box, and the empty space where my filing cabinet had stood. Nora Ellis's office occupied 2 rooms above a public library. She was in her early 60s, with cropped black hair and a voice that made every sentence sound measured. She listened without interrupting while I explained the hospital, the transfers, the deed, and the attempted move. Eleanor added only what she had personally observed. When we finished, Nora removed her glasses. "Mr. Hale, I need to say something clearly. What you are describing is not a family disagreement. It is suspected forgery, theft, abuse of authority, and attempted unlawful transfer of trust property." Hearing the words from a lawyer made them heavier. "If I report him, will he go to jail?" I asked. "I cannot predict that. I can tell you that delaying action gives him time to borrow against the house, move the funds, or seek an emergency guardianship. He's my son. I understand." "No, I don't think you do." My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. "I taught him to ride a bicycle. I sat beside him when his appendix came out. I held his daughter while he slept in a hospital chair. How do I walk into a police station and turn that person into a criminal?" Nora waited until I looked at her. "You do not turn him into anything," she said. "You report what happened. His choices determine the name the law gives those actions." Eleanor said nothing. She did not push me. Nora reviewed the recorded certificate and agreed the physician's signature required immediate verification. She prepared a revocation of every financial power of attorney I had granted Jason or Melissa. She also drafted an affidavit stating I had not resigned as trustee and disputed the certificate of incapacity. The title company agreed by phone to suspend the closing after hearing there was an alleged forged medical statement. Then Nora asked about the trust agreement itself. "The original was in my filing cabinet," I said. "Jason has it?" "Probably." "Who drafted it?" I named Carol's attorney, who had retired and moved away. Nora found that his files had been transferred to another firm. She requested a copy, but the retrieval could take several days. "Until then, we assume your son will argue he acted in good faith," Nora said. "We need an independent capacity evaluation immediately. Not because I doubt you, because he has already placed your capacity at issue." She scheduled an appointment for the next morning with a geriatric psychiatrist who conducted forensic evaluations. I disliked every word in that description. Still, I agreed. Nora also called Dr. Reeves. He was with a patient, but his office manager confirmed there was no cognitive diagnosis in my chart and no letter of incapacity on file. She asked us to send the document. By the time we left, Nora had faxed notices to the title company, my bank, Jason's business bank, and the county recorder. She had also made an adult protective services referral with my consent. Now comes the uncomfortable part, she said at the door. Your son may become more aggressive when he realizes the property is blocked. Do not meet him alone. Do not sign anything. Save every message. And do not underestimate the emotional pressure he can apply. He already left me at the hospital. That may not be the worst thing he is willing to explain as help. Eleanor's county driver took us back to the nursery. On the way, my phone filled with messages. Jason wrote, "You embarrassed us in front of strangers." Then, "The title company says you reported fraud. Call them back now." Then, "If my employees lose their jobs, that is on you." Melissa wrote, "You are having another episode. Please tell us where that woman took you." I saved screenshots and did not respond. At the cottage, I found a message from an unfamiliar number. "Grandpa, it's Sophie. Dad says you disappeared from the hospital with a woman who is trying to steal your house. Please tell me you're alive." I sat down so quickly the chair scraped the floor. For 11 months, I had believed Sophie wanted nothing to do with me. Jason had told me she refused my calls because I accused her of stealing Carol's wedding ring. That accusation had not come from nowhere. Melissa found the jewelry box empty after Sophie visited. Jason showed me a pawn ticket bearing Sophie's name. I had left 2 messages asking her to return the ring. She responded once, "I can't believe you chose them again." Then her number stopped working. I typed, "I'm alive. I did not disappear. Your father left me after discharge." The phone rang before I could add another sentence. "Grandpa?" Sophie's voice was older than I remembered and frightened enough to erase almost a year in a single word. "I'm here," I said. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Is somebody pressuring you to change your will?" "No. Your father tried to sell my house." Silence. Then she exhaled as if a suspicion had finally become solid. "He did it," she whispered. "Did what?" "He used the doctor letter." I gripped the phone. "You knew about that?" "I saw a draft on Mom's laptop in May. It didn't have a signature. Dad said it was for insurance. When I asked why it called you cognitively impaired, he told me I was reading private medical information and threatened to cut off my tuition." "Why didn't you tell me?" Her answer came sharp with old hurt. "I tried. You blocked me." "I never blocked you." Every call went straight to voicemail. My emails came back. "Dad said you changed everything after the ring. You took Carol's ring." The sentence came out weaker than I intended. "No, Grandpa. Mom pawned it." The cottage became very still. "I saw the receipt in her desk," Sophie continued. "She used my old driver's license information because I was 20 and easy to blame. I confronted them. Dad said the ring belonged to the family and they would replace it before you noticed." Mom cried. "Then Dad told you I stole it." I closed my eyes. Carol's ring had been modest. A small diamond from a jewelry store near the water plant. Its monetary value was not the wound. I had watched Sophie grow up. She had baked cookies with Carol, helped during the months of chemotherapy, and called me every Sunday from college. One forged pawn ticket had outweighed all of that because trusting Jason required less courage than confronting him. "I am sorry," I said. Sophie began to cry quietly. "I needed you to ask me. Just once. I needed you to ask instead of leaving messages that said you already knew. You're right. I didn't stop loving you." The words broke something open in me. I bent forward, one hand over my face. "I didn't stop loving you either," I said. "But I failed you." We stayed on the phone without speaking for several seconds. The silence did not feel empty. It felt like the first honest place we had shared in a long time. Sophie told me she had moved into an apartment with 2 classmates and was finishing her final year of nursing school. Jason had stopped helping with tuition after she questioned the document. She worked nights at a rehabilitation center. She had kept screenshots of text conversations because Melissa often deleted messages and later denied sending them. "There's more," she said. "Dad recorded you after your colonoscopy last year. You were still sedated. He kept asking what month it was and who the president was. Mom laughed when you answered wrong. I remembered waking at home after that procedure with a headache and no clear memory of the drive. Why would he record that? He said it was a joke. It didn't feel like one." Nora's warning returned to me. "Emergency guardianship. Do you still have the messages?" "I have everything. Can you meet me tomorrow?" "Tell me where." I gave her Nora's office address instead of Eleanor's. Even with Sophie, I had begun to understand the value of sharing only what a person needed. After the call, I went to the farmhouse. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, sorting seed catalogs into neat piles. I told her about Sophie, the ring, and the video. Your son isolated you by making each of you believe the other had chosen silence, she said. I helped him. Yes, I expected comfort. Her agreement hurt, but it also steadied me. Aren't you supposed to tell me I was manipulated? I asked. You were manipulated. You also made a choice. If you admit only the first, you remain helpless. If you admit both, you can make a different choice now. I sat across from her. Did Grant do that to you? He tried. After my grandson Daniel died, Grant told my friends I was too tired for visitors. He told me they had stopped calling because people become uncomfortable around grief. By the time I compared stories, 2 years had passed. Was that why you asked me to pretend to be Daniel? I did not ask you to be Daniel. I asked you to occupy the word grandson long enough to remind Grant that he might be observed. She looked toward the dark window. Daniel was 42 when a drunk driver crossed the center line. He had no wife and no children. He ran the greenhouse and knew every customer by name. After he died, Grant began visiting every week. Grief makes attention feel like kindness, Thomas. That is how I gave him limited power of attorney. Have you revoked it? Nora prepared the papers last month. Grant disputes the revocation and says I lacked capacity when I signed it. Then why was he at the hospital? Because he remains my emergency contact with the health system. I changed it twice. Somehow it changed back. I thought about my own altered passwords. What is he planning? A guardianship petition? A land option? Perhaps both? The survey stakes appeared near the eastern field yesterday. 2 older people sat at a kitchen table, each holding a story in which family members described theft as care. It would have been easy to decide we were victims and wait for better people to rescue us. Instead, Eleanor pushed a blank legal pad toward me. Tomorrow, she said, you bring your granddaughter into the truth. I bring my physician. Then we find out which papers are real. The geriatric psychiatrist's office was deliberately ordinary. No bars on the windows. No nurse standing over me with a clipboard. Just a round table, 2 chairs, and a shelf of puzzles that made me feel older than any mirror ever had. Dr. Patel asked me the date, the county, and the reason for my visit. He gave me 5 words to remember, then changed the subject for 10 minutes. I drew a clock, subtracted 7 from 100 until I reached a number I was not entirely sure about, identified animals from small black drawings, and explained what I would do if I smelled smoke in a crowded theater. Then he asked about Jason. That part was harder than the numbers. Do you believe your son wants to harm you? I believe he wants my money badly enough to call the harm necessary. Do you hate him? No. Do you trust him? No. Can both answers be true? They have to be. When the evaluation ended, Dr. Patel said he would send Nora a full report. He did not tell me the result in the room, but he asked whether I had plans for lunch and advised me to keep them. That felt like a good sign. Sophie was waiting at Nora's office when Eleanor and I arrived. She stood the moment I entered. At 23, she looked like Carol had at that age. Same serious blue eyes, same way of pressing her lips together when emotion threatened. Her hair was shorter, and fatigue shadowed the skin beneath her eyes. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she crossed the room and put her arms around me carefully, avoiding my wrist. I smelled hospital soap on her uniform. You're real, she whispered. So are you. I held her longer than either of us intended. When we separated, she wiped her face and laughed once from embarrassment. I brought too much, she said, lifting a canvas tote. There is no such thing as too much documentation, Eleanor told her. Sophie looked at the 94-year-old woman beside me. Are you the fake grandmother? Eleanor extended a hand. Temporarily. That was how they met. Inside Nora's office, Sophie spread printed screenshots across the conference table. The first messages dated back nearly a year. In one, Melissa told Jason that the pawn shop would accept an online identity check if they used Sophie's old license. In another, Jason wrote, Dad will believe the ticket. He always believes paper. I read that sentence several times. Sophie touched my sleeve. You don't have to read everything today. Yes, I do. The messages showed the ring had brought only $950. Melissa used the money for a supplier deposit. 2 months later, Jason considered buying a replacement, but the same design was no longer available. Instead, he used the theft story to turn me against Sophie when she began questioning their access to my accounts. Other messages were more recent. In March, Melissa wrote, "If he gets evaluated now, he'll pass. Wait until the next hospital visit." Jason replied, "The trust only needs a doctor letter." In April, Melissa wrote, "Leah says she can notarize if he signs at home." Jason replied, "He doesn't need to sign the incapacity certificate. I do." One thread referred to Horizon Oak Holdings as our buyer. Another calculated how much cash would remain after paying Jason's business line, Melissa's credit cards, and a tax lien. The amount left for my care was $47,000. "They planned to spend more than $300,000 and leave you with less than $50," Sophie said. Nora looked at the incorporation record I had printed. "Do you know who owns Horizon Oak?" "Dad and Mom argued about percentages," Sophie said. "I think Mom's brother filed it, but Dad put up the fee." The sale was not simply below market. Jason was transferring the house into a company his household controlled, using the property to secure a loan, and telling me an outside buyer had made an offer. Nora's calm expression did not change, but she began placing certain pages into a separate pile. "These go to the detective," she said. The word detective made Sophie pale. "Will my parents know I gave them to you?" "Eventually, yes," Nora said. "We can take precautions." "Have they ever threatened you physically?" "No. Dad punches walls, not people." Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "Walls are practice for frightening people. Do not dismiss it." Sophie nodded. She also had a 48-second video recorded 2 nights before my hospital procedure. In it, Jason stood in my den beside the open filing cabinet. Melissa filmed while he held the trust agreement and joked that I had buried the family treasure under 8 pages of legal language. Then he turned serious. "Page 6, he said. 2 doctors. Melissa answered. "Grant's place has doctors. Hawthorne, not Grant's. Same people. Once your dad is admitted, they'll certify anything." The recording ended. Eleanor asked Sophie to play it again. "Did your mother say Grant?" she asked. "I think so." "Does she know Grant Fowler?" "I don't know." Eleanor stared at the frozen image. "Grant negotiated a referral agreement for Hawthorne Memory Care last year. He receives a consulting fee when the facility purchases land for expansion. The connection was not a conspiracy designed in secret. It was worse in an ordinary way. People who profited from vulnerable families kept finding one another because they moved through the same facilities, title offices, and development meetings. Melissa may have known Grant only as the consultant who could arrange quick placement and cooperative medical paperwork. Nora made a note. "Mrs. Whitcomb, your case and Mr. Hale's may now overlap. We need to be careful about conflicts." "Then refer one of us to another attorney," Eleanor said. "The facts do not disappear because the paperwork becomes inconvenient." Nora arranged for a colleague to handle Eleanor's guardianship dispute while she continued representing me. She copied only the evidence relevant to both cases and obtained our written consent before sharing anything. Then the facts from Carol's former law firm arrived. The complete trust agreement was 32 pages. Page 6 required 2 licensed physicians, each of whom had personally examined me within 30 days, to certify my incapacity. Page 9 prohibited a successor trustee who was also a beneficiary from transferring trust property to himself, a spouse, or an entity either controlled without independent court approval. Page 21 required the trustee to preserve the home for my use during my lifetime, unless I personally chose another residence or a court found the sale necessary for my care. Jason had not misunderstood. The video proved he had read the exact restrictions he violated. At 2 in the afternoon, Dr. Reeves called. His voice shook with anger. He had never written the incapacity statement. The letterhead was copied from a work note he issued after I strained my back. The signature was a digital image lifted from another document. "Tom, I am reporting this to the medical board and police," he said. "I want you to hear that from me directly. Thank you. For what it's worth, I saw no indication of dementia when I examined you. It's worth more than you know, Doctor." Patel's preliminary report arrived an hour later. I had scored 29 out of 30 on the cognitive assessment. He described me as fully oriented, capable of understanding complex financial and legal choices, and experiencing appropriate emotional distress. He found no evidence of a neurocognitive disorder. For the first time since the hospital, I believed we might stop Jason before he caused permanent damage. That belief lasted until Grant Fowler walked into Nora's waiting room. He carried the same leather folder and wore the same courteous expression. Jason and Melissa followed him. Sophie went rigid beside me. Jason saw her and said, "You have got to be kidding." Nora stepped between us. "This is a law office. If you are here to serve documents, give them to me. If you are here to intimidate my client or a witness, leave." Grant handed her an envelope. "Emergency petition for guardianship and protective placement. The hearing is tomorrow morning." "On whose petition?" I asked. "Mine," Jason said. "You won't answer me. You emptied the house of medication. You're traveling with a woman who pretended you were family. Sophie has been feeding you lies because she wants back into the will." Sophie flinched. "You left me," I said. "You took my medication. I filled your prescription. You disappeared before I could bring it. After you abandoned me with $40. Melissa stepped closer to Sophie. "Honey, come home. You don't understand what these people are doing." Sophie backed away. "I understand the pawn ticket." Color drained from Melissa's face. Jason looked from her to the tote of papers on Nora's table. His jaw tightened. "You stole private messages," he said. "You stole Grandpa's money." Grant addressed Eleanor in the tone people use with children. "You need to come with me. The court issued an order for a capacity evaluation." "I completed one this morning with my own physician and another last month," Eleanor said. "Your evaluator may request an appointment through counsel." "You recruited this man from a hospital and told him to impersonate your dead grandson. For approximately 90 seconds. It was one of my better casting decisions." Grant's smile tightened. "A judge may not find it amusing." Nora opened the petition while they stood there. Jason alleged I was unable to manage medication, had wandered away after a procedure, accused family members of crimes without basis, and was being influenced by Eleanor to transfer assets. Attached were photographs of me leaving the hospital in the county van and entering Whitcomb Nursery. Grant had provided an affidavit saying I falsely claimed to be Eleanor's grandson in order to interfere with her care. The petition also included the colonoscopy video. Jason had edited it to 40 seconds. I sat in a recliner with my eyes half closed while he asked the month. I said March when it was September. He asked where I lived, and I gave the address of the house where Carol and I had lived 20 years earlier. The clip ended before a voice, probably Sophie's, said, "Dad, stop. He is still under anesthesia." Seeing myself that way frightened me, despite knowing the reason. I looked confused. I sounded weak. If a stranger watched only that clip, Jason's story might seem plausible. "There are also statements from neighbors," Nora said. Jason had persuaded 2 people on my street to describe incidents they believed showed decline. One saw me leave my garage door open overnight. Another found me searching through recycling bins because I had misplaced an envelope. Both events were true. Neither meant what Jason said they meant. The final attachment was a letter from the medical director of Hawthorne stating that Jason had consulted the facility about my progressive memory impairment and that supervised placement would reduce risk. The doctor had never met me. "You planned this," I said. Jason's expression softened into something that might have convinced me once. "I planned to keep you safe. By selling my home to yourself?" That accusation proves how far this has gone. Nora closed the petition. "You should leave now." Grant looked at me. "Tomorrow, the judge will hear from people who have known you for years, Mr. Hale, not a woman you met yesterday. Tomorrow, the judge will also hear from my doctor." For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Jason noticed it. "What doctor?" I remembered Nora's instruction not to reveal evidence. "You'll find out tomorrow." They left together. Through the window, I watched Grant speak to Jason beside the elevator. Melissa stood close, listening. They had arrived as allies now, each prepared to describe the other's target as confused. "Can they win?" Sophie asked. Nora did not offer false reassurance. "They can win temporary restrictions. Emergency proceedings move fast because courts are trying to prevent immediate harm. That speed can also magnify misleading evidence." "But Grandpa passed the evaluation." "That is strong. The forged letter is stronger. But we received the petition less than 24 hours before hearing. I need certified records, not only screenshots. A judge may appoint a neutral temporary guardian while the facts are investigated." I felt the walls closing in. "Would they put me in Hawthorne?" "I will fight that. You have a safe place and no medical need for institutional care. Eleanor tapped her cane once. He may remain at the nursery. Nora looked at her. Your presence is part of their allegation. Then he may stay in the tenant cottage under a written lease at fair rent. My housekeeper can be the on-site contact. Grant does not own the meaning of a photograph. We spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Sophie contacted the endoscopy center and requested the complete anesthesia record. Nora subpoenaed the original video from Jason's phone and sent preservation notices to the title company, Horizon Oak, the banks, and Hawthorne. Dr. Reeves signed an affidavit denying the incapacity letter. Dr. Patel agreed to testify by video. I signed a new healthcare directive naming Sophie only after Nora spoke to her privately and made sure she understood the responsibility. For finances, I chose a licensed fiduciary temporarily. I did not name Eleanor. That distinction mattered. She was my ally, not the new person controlling my assets. When Sophie drove us back to the nursery, a black sport utility vehicle followed for 6 miles. It turned away only after we passed a sheriff's station. We could not prove it belonged to anyone connected to Jason, but Sophie photographed the plate. At the farmhouse, Eleanor's eastern field was marked with bright orange survey flags. Grant had no authority to order the survey, yet a contractor had entered that morning after showing the housekeeper a work order bearing Eleanor's signature. Not mine, Eleanor said after examining it. I almost laughed, though nothing was funny. They do seem to love paper. Paper is obedient until somebody reads it. We called the survey company, revoked permission to enter, and photographed the flags. Eleanor's attorney added the incident to her response. That evening, Sophie cooked scrambled eggs because neither Eleanor nor I had the energy for anything else. The 3 of us ate in the farmhouse kitchen. I learned that Sophie liked neonatal nursing but feared the emotional strain. She learned that I had started repairing antique radios since Carol's death. Eleanor told us she hated scrambled eggs but continued eating them because complaining gave her strength. For 1 hour, the legal crisis receded. I was a grandfather listening to his granddaughter describe her life. The loss of 11 months remained between us, but it no longer controlled the room. Then someone pounded on the front door. 2 sheriff's deputies stood on the porch with a county social worker. They were polite. That made the situation more frightening, not less. The social worker said they had received a report that a cognitively impaired man had been removed from medical care and was being held at the property by an unrelated woman. She asked to speak to me alone. I went with her to the sitting room. She asked whether I knew where I was, whether I could leave, whether Eleanor had promised me money, and whether I had given her access to my accounts. I answered every question. I showed my discharge papers, Nora's card, the lease we had signed for the cottage, and the receipt for the prescription I had collected. Who made the report? I asked. I can't disclose that. Was it my son? I can't disclose that either. Did the caller mention the $40 he left me? Her expression changed slightly. No. One deputy spoke to Eleanor. The other walked around the cottage and confirmed I had my phone, keys, clothing, and access to transportation. Sophie showed her identification and explained she had chosen to stay. The deputies left without removing anyone, but the social worker said her report would remain open until the guardianship hearing. After their car disappeared, I sat on the porch in the cold air. This is how they do it, I said. Every time I defend myself, it becomes another sign that I'm unstable. Eleanor lowered herself into the chair beside me. Then do not perform sanity for them. State facts. Keep records. Let impatience belong to the people who need a quick sale. How long have you been fighting, Grant? 14 months. I looked at her small hands and wondered how many forms they had signed, how many calls they had made, how often she had been forced to prove what younger people were permitted to assume about themselves. Aren't you tired? Completely. Then why keep going? Because tired is not the same as finished. The probate courtroom the next morning was smaller than I expected. No jury, no dramatic rows of spectators, just a raised bench, 2 counsel tables, and fluorescent light that made everyone look unwell. Jason sat across the aisle wearing a navy suit I bought him for Sophie's high school graduation. Melissa held his hand. Grant sat behind them, ready to testify. Sophie sat beside Nora and me. Eleanor remained outside because Nora did not want her presence used to distract from the evidence. Before the bailiff called the case, Jason looked at me as if he wanted a private conversation. I kept my eyes on the legal pad in front of me. Jason's attorney began with the colonoscopy clip. He called it a representative example of my decline. He described my hospital departure as wandering, the frozen bank accounts as paranoia, and my decision to stay at the nursery as evidence that I was susceptible to manipulation. Then Grant testified. Mrs. Whitcomb has recently displayed serious confusion, he said. Mr. Hale approached her at the hospital and falsely represented himself as her grandson. He prevented her from entering professional care, then accompanied her to property worth several $1,000,000. Within hours, he accused his own family of theft. Nora asked him one question on cross-examination. Did Mrs. Whitcomb tell hospital staff that Mr. Hale was actually her grandson? Grant hesitated. She called him that. Did she sign any form identifying him as family? Not that I saw. Did Mr. Hale sign any form for her? No. Did the hospital release Mrs. Whitcomb to Hawthorne? No. Because she refused? Because she was confused. The judge interrupted. Mr. Fowler, answer the question asked. Grant's jaw tightened. Yes. She refused. Jason testified next. He cried when he described finding me collapsed at breakfast. That part was true. He said he had rearranged his life for 6 months to manage my bills and appointments. Also true. He said selling the house had been a painful decision necessary to finance safe long-term care. Nora placed the Horizon Oak corporate record in front of him. Who owns this company? She asked. I'm not sure. You signed its formation payment from your personal account. For my brother-in-law. Does your wife hold an ownership interest? I would have to check. Were the proceeds of the proposed loan going to pay Hale Residential Solutions? His attorney objected, saying the financial details exceeded the scope of an emergency capacity hearing. The judge allowed limited questions. Jason admitted the company expected to receive money but called it reimbursement for years of caregiving and home improvements. Did your father agree to that reimbursement? Nora asked. He always said the house would be mine. After his death? Jason looked at me. We never talked about timing. Did you leave him at St. Catherine with $40? His face changed. I left cash for transportation. Did you remove his debit and credit cards? For safekeeping. Did you tell the discharge nurse you would remain with him overnight? I intended to. What changed? He glanced at his attorney. My wife needed help with the move. The judge wrote something. Nora then introduced Dr. Reeves's affidavit and the preliminary cognitive report. Dr. Patel testified that I was fully capable of managing my affairs. Jason's lawyer responded that a high score on a brief test did not rule out fluctuating impairment or undue influence. Technically, that was true. The judge asked why the physician letter attached to Jason's successor trustee certificate appeared to be forged. Jason said Melissa handled the paperwork. Melissa stiffened behind him. His attorney argued that the authenticity dispute required further investigation and should not determine whether temporary protection was appropriate. He proposed Jason as guardian and Hawthorne as placement. Nora opposed both. She offered the licensed fiduciary I had selected and the cottage lease as less restrictive alternatives. The judge took a 15-minute recess. I had repaired municipal systems during floods. I had waited for surgeons to tell me whether Carol would survive an operation. Nothing prepared me for sitting outside a courtroom while strangers decided whether I was legally allowed to control my own life. Jason approached me near the water fountain. Call off the fraud report, he whispered. I'll withdraw the guardianship. Return the money and admit the letter is false. I can't return money that went to payroll. Then you cannot undo what you did. His eyes filled with anger. You care more about punishing me than protecting the people who depend on me. You made them depend on stolen money. Mom would hate what you're doing. The words struck where he intended. For an instant I saw Carol in our kitchen, asking me to be patient with him. Then I remembered another thing she used to say. Do not put words in the mouths of the dead. They have no way to correct you. Your mother wrote the trust you violated, I said. Do not use her to excuse it. The bailiff called us back. The judge denied Jason's request to be appointed guardian and refused institutional placement. But she did not dismiss the case. Because of the forged property document, disputed transfers, conflicting family claims, and pending criminal investigation, she appointed a neutral temporary conservator for 10 days. I remained free to choose where I lived and make medical decisions, but I could not access my frozen accounts, sell property, alter the trust, or remove items from my home without the conservator's approval. The proposed house sale remained blocked. A full evidentiary hearing would be held after independent records were obtained. It was a cautious ruling. Nora called it a partial victory. I heard only one thing. For 10 days, I was no longer the legal person in charge of the money I had spent a lifetime earning. Jason did not win control, but he had succeeded in taking mine. Outside the courthouse, reporters were not waiting. There was no crowd to gasp. Rain fell on a nearly empty parking lot. Jason and Melissa drove away with Grant. Sophie offered me her arm, and I refused too quickly. "I can walk," I said. "I know." The hurt in her voice stopped me. I took her arm. Not because I could not walk, but because she had come back to stand beside me. At the nursery, I found an envelope taped to the cottage door. Inside was a photocopy of the Hawthorne admission agreement Jason had prepared. My signature appeared on the final page. I had never seen the document. A handwritten note said, "You signed this, Dad. Stop pretending everyone else is lying." For several minutes I stood in the cold, holding proof that Jason was no longer trying merely to control my future. He was trying to rewrite my memory of the past. Then Sophie pointed to the signature. "That isn't yours," she said. "It looks like mine." "No. Look at the H. You connect the second line. Dad copies it wrong every time." Every time. I turned toward her. "How many times has he copied my signature?" She looked at the ground. "More than one." Sophie had not kept the knowledge to protect Jason. She had kept it because she did not know what counted as proof and feared that another accusation without enough evidence would push me farther away. 2 years earlier, Melissa asked to borrow Sophie's laptop while their home computer was being repaired. She installed the application for the family printer and left it connected to a shared cloud folder. Every scan made from the printer had been copied there automatically. Sophie discovered the folder after the argument about the pawn ticket. Most documents were ordinary invoices. Some were not. There was a personal guarantee for Jason's truck loan bearing my signature. I had agreed to guarantee that loan, but the document in the folder raised the limit from $40,000 to $75,000 6 months after I signed. There were 2 checks written against my home equity line, though I had closed the line years earlier. There was a consent form allowing Melissa to speak for me with my health insurer. There were practice pages showing my name written again and again in slightly different styles. And there was a scan of the Hawthorne admission agreement before my signature had been added. The blank version had been created at 9:12 on the morning Jason abandoned me. The signed version had been created at 4:47 that afternoon, while I was at Whitcomb Nursery speaking with the bank. Sophie opened the file information on her phone. Mom thinks deleting a document deletes its history. It doesn't always. I looked at the timestamps. "Why did you say every time?" "Because Dad signed your name on school forms when I was younger. Permission slips, financial aid papers, anything he forgot to ask you about. He treated it like a family shortcut." That was how large betrayals often began. Not with a single monstrous decision, but with small dishonesties that worked. A permission slip became a loan form. A loan form became a medical certificate. Each time the world failed to stop him, Jason learned that paper could make consent appear where none existed. Nora sent the files to a forensic document examiner and asked the temporary conservator to preserve the printer, laptop, and Jason's business records. The conservator authorized police to recover my filing cabinet and computer from the storage unit listed on the moving company invoice. Officers photographed the contents before releasing personal items to me. Carol's ring was not there. Neither were several savings bonds, my coin collection, or the emergency cash I kept in a locked envelope. But the trust file remained intact. Jason had taken what he needed from it and apparently believed possession of the original would strengthen his authority. Inside the file, behind the formal agreement, was a sealed envelope in Carol's handwriting. "For Tom and Jason, if the house ever becomes an argument." I did not open it immediately. Carol had prepared the trust after her diagnosis, when every conversation about the future felt like theft from the time we still had. I remembered her sitting at the dining table with legal pads and medication bottles, insisting that we finish the documents before the next round of treatment. Sophie sat beside me in the cottage while I broke the seal. Carol's letter was only 2 pages. "Tom, this home is yours for as long as you want it. Do not remain here because you think grief requires it. And do not leave because anyone makes you feel guilty for living. Jason, If you are reading this, remember that an inheritance is what remains after a life has been lived. It is not money owed to you in advance. Your father's security is not an obstacle to your future. It is part of the duty we gave you when we named you successor trustee. Near the end, she had written, "Help offered freely is love. Help demanded through fear is control. Learn the difference before you lose each other." Sophie read over my shoulder. She knew. She knew he was always in a hurry for the next solution. "Are you going to show him?" I folded the letter along its original crease. "When he is ready to read it without turning it into an argument." That afternoon, Nora received the complete video from the colonoscopy day. Jason's edited clip ended at 40 seconds. The original continued for 6 minutes. After I gave the wrong address, Sophie told him to stop. Melissa answered, "No, this is exactly what the Hawthorne doctor needs." Jason asked me whether I wanted him to take care of the house. I mumbled, "Take me home." He asked the question 3 more times until I said, "Take care of it." Then Melissa laughed and said, "That's close enough." The anesthesia record showed I had received midazolam and fentanyl less than 90 minutes earlier. The discharge instructions explicitly warned that I could experience temporary confusion and could not provide informed consent to financial decisions for 24 hours. When Nora played the complete recording for the temporary conservator, the woman removed her glasses and said, "I have been doing this work for 18 years. I have seen families misinterpret confusion. This is the first time I have watched people manufacture it." She authorized supervised access to my home and requested an immediate accounting from Jason. Jason did not provide one. Instead, he called Sophie. She let it ring, then looked at me. We were in Eleanor's kitchen. "What should I do?" "What do you want to do?" Answer: "I want to hear what he says when he thinks I'm alone." Ohio law allowed a person to record a conversation in which she participated. Nora had explained that, but she also warned Sophie not to provoke statements or put herself at risk. Sophie started the recorder and answered. Jason did not say hello. "You need to fix this," he said. "Fix what?" "Tell Grandpa you misunderstood the messages. Tell the lawyer you took screenshots out of context. Did Mom pawn Grandma's ring?" "We had a cash emergency." "Using my name?" "Your mother made a mistake." "Did you forge Grandpa's Hawthorne form?" His voice dropped. "Signing for somebody in the family is not forgery when you are responsible for their care." "You weren't responsible. You left him at the hospital." "I left him enough for a ride. I needed him to understand that we could not keep rescuing him from his own choices." Eleanor's eyes met mine across the table. The $40 had not been an afterthought. They had been a lesson my son intended to teach me. Sophie kept her voice steady. "He paid your bills. And I lost years helping him maintain a house he doesn't need. Do you know what my company owes? If that sale fails, 22 people lose their jobs. So you took his money. I borrowed money that would be mine eventually." "What about the doctor's signature?" There was a pause. "Melissa handled that. Did you know it was fake?" "I knew Dr. Reeves would not cooperate. We needed a certificate before closing. Your grandfather was going to Hawthorne anyway, and their doctor could have confirmed it later. But Grandpa isn't impaired. He is stubborn, isolated, and living with a 94-year-old woman he met in a hospital. What would you call that? A man finding help after his son abandoned him." Jason's voice hardened. "If you keep choosing him, do not come to me when your tuition is due. You stopped paying months ago. I can catch it up. I can pay the whole final year if you sign an affidavit saying that woman pressured him and that you took the screenshots because she promised you money." Sophie closed her eyes. "No," she said. "Think before you answer." "I have spent 11 months thinking." "No." He hung up. Sophie stopped the recording. Her hands shook, and I covered them with mine. "I'm sorry about the tuition," I said. "They'll finish. It may take longer, but I'll finish. When the conservatorship ends, I can help." She pulled her hands away. Not because I testified. The words could have offended me. Instead, I felt proud. "No," I said, "because Carol and I opened an education account when you were born, and your parents told me it was empty. I am going to find out whether that was another lie. If the money is gone, any help will be documented as a gift with no conditions." Eleanor nodded once. "A family can contain generosity without confusion. It merely requires adults." The education account had not been emptied. Jason had changed the mailing address and used it as collateral information on a private loan, but the funds remained. The bank restored Sophie as beneficiary after receiving the trust documents. She could finish school without taking money from Jason or me. That small recovery mattered almost as much as the house. It proved that stopping exploitation was not only about punishing what had happened. It was about rescuing the future before someone spent it. 3 days before the full hearing, Eleanor's case came before a different probate judge. Her physician testified that she had arthritis, hearing loss, and occasional difficulty recalling names, but remained capable of making decisions. A forensic examiner found that the land option bearing her signature had been assembled from 2 documents. The first page described a harmless soil study she had approved. The remaining pages granted a developer the option to purchase the eastern field at less than half its appraised value. Grant claimed an office assistant had attached the wrong page by mistake. Then I testified about the hospital. I described how Eleanor clearly refused Hawthorne, how Grant told staff she had canceled county transportation when she had not, and how he called her paranoid after she mentioned the survey. I admitted that I pretended to be her grandson. Why? Grant's attorney asked. Because she was frightened, and he behaved differently when he believed another family member was watching. So your relationship began with deception. It began with protection. The deception lasted 90 seconds. The protection lasted after we told the truth. The judge denied Grant's guardianship petition, upheld Eleanor's revocation of his power of attorney, and ordered him to return all business records. The developer withdrew the land option before the judge could rule on it. Grant was referred for investigation over the altered document and unauthorized access to Eleanor's medical portal. Outside the courtroom, he approached her one last time. "You have destroyed the only family you have left," he said. Eleanor stood very straight despite her cane. "No, Grant. I stopped you from selling what was never yours. If the only relationship you offered required my obedience, I lost it the day I said no." He looked at me. "Enjoy the land." "I'm not getting the land," I said. He did not believe me. In his world, everyone's help concealed a purchase price. Eleanor watched him leave, then sat on the courthouse bench. Her victory did not make her smile. "I changed his diapers," she said. "After his mother left, he spent summers at the nursery. He used to sleep with a flashlight because he was afraid of storms." I sat beside her. Jason used to wait at the front window when I worked nights. We remained there together. Justice and grief occupied the same bench. Neither canceled the other. My full hearing took place 2 days later. By then, the bank's investigation had traced every transfer. Jason used Melissa's tablet and my saved credentials. Security codes had been redirected to an internet phone number he controlled. $83,400 moved into his business account. $26,000 went to payroll, but the rest paid personal credit cards, a vacation deposit, Melissa's vehicle, and the formation costs for Horizon Oak. The title company produced its file. Jason had represented that I was permanently entering memory care and that the home required extensive repairs. He directed net sale proceeds to Horizon Oak's account, not to the Hale Family Living Trust. An internal email showed the closer had asked why the buyer and seller shared a mailing address. Jason answered that it was an interfamily estate simplification. The forensic examiner concluded that my signature on the Hawthorne agreement had been traced from a tax return. The signature on the altered truck guarantee came from the same source. Dr. Reeves appeared in person to deny writing or signing the incapacity statement. Hawthorne's medical director admitted on cross-examination that he had never evaluated me and wrote his letter entirely from information Jason supplied. Then the complete colonoscopy video played. The courtroom heard Melissa say, "This is exactly what the Hawthorne doctor needs." It heard Jason repeat the same question until my drugged answer resembled consent. It heard Sophie tell them to stop. Jason stared down at the table. Melissa had retained separate counsel and invoked her right not to testify. She no longer held Jason's hand. Sophie took the witness stand. She spoke clearly about the pawn ticket, the shared scan folder, the trust video, and the call offering to pay her tuition for a false affidavit. Jason's attorney suggested she resented her parents over financial support and wanted my inheritance. Sophie looked at the judge, not the attorney. "I don't want my grandfather's house," she said. "I want him to be alive in it, if that is where he chooses to live." Nora played Jason's recorded call. His own voice filled the courtroom. I borrowed money that would be mine eventually. When it was my turn, Nora asked me to describe the morning of my procedure and the hospital discharge. I told the truth without decorating it. Jason had cared for me during dizzy spells. He had driven me to appointments. I had trusted him with passwords and signed papers without reading them. I had also ignored Sophie's denial because accepting Jason's version was easier than confronting conflict. Do those choices mean you need a guardian? Nora asked. No. They mean I made mistakes. What do you want the court to do? I looked at Jason. His face seemed both older and younger under the fluorescent lights. Restore my authority. Protect the trust. Let the criminal investigation follow the evidence. And do not appoint my son to any position over another person until he understands that love does not create ownership. Jason's attorney asked whether Eleanor had promised me an inheritance. No. Has she given you money? No. Housing has value, does it not? I signed a lease at fair market rent. The temporary conservator approved it. Did she ask you to pose as her grandson? Yes. And you agreed, despite having met her only minutes earlier? Yes. Does that sound like careful judgment? I thought before answering. Careful judgment is not the refusal to take every risk. It is understanding the risk you take. I did not sign for her, handle her money, speak to her doctor, or conceal the truth from hospital staff. I stood beside a frightened woman until a man stopped pressuring her. Then she stood beside me when my son did the same. The attorney had no further questions. Jason testified again. This time his story had changed. He said Melissa controlled the documents and led him to believe the physician letter was legitimate. He admitted using my money, but insisted he intended to repay it after a large construction contract. He said the $40 had been an emotional mistake made under pressure. Nora played the sentence from his call to Sophie. I left him enough for a ride. I needed him to understand that we could not keep rescuing him from his own choices. Which version is true? She asked. An emotional mistake or a planned lesson? Jason's eyes moved to me. I was angry. Did anger create Horizon Oak 11 weeks earlier? No. Did anger alter the trust certificate 2 days before the procedure? No. Did anger schedule movers for the day of discharge? He did not answer. Mr. Hale? No. You did not abandon your father and then decide to sell his home. You arranged to sell his home and abandoned him when he interfered, correct? Jason's attorney objected. The judge overruled and directed him to answer. For several seconds, my son stared at his hands. I thought once he was at Hawthorne, he would adjust, he said. That was the closest he came to admitting the whole truth. The judge ruled from the bench. She terminated the temporary conservatorship and dismissed the guardianship petition with prejudice. She found that I possessed full legal capacity and that the petition had been used, in substantial part, to advance a financial scheme. She declared Jason's successor trustee certificate invalid, ordered the fraudulent document marked as disputed in county records, and prohibited Jason and Melissa from entering my property or contacting financial institutions on my behalf. The house sale was void. Horizon Oak's financing application was canceled. The bank was ordered to restore the misappropriated funds where possible and pursue the receiving accounts. Claims for remaining losses would proceed separately. The judge forwarded the complete record to the county prosecutor and financial crimes division. Then she looked directly at Jason. Concern for an aging parent does not permit a child to manufacture incapacity, she said. Expected inheritance is not present ownership. Repeating the word family does not transform self-dealing into care. The gavel made a small sound. Nothing exploded. No one applauded. Yet I felt the world return to its proper position. Outside the courtroom, Jason caught up with me before the deputy could intervene. "Dad, please," he said. Nora stepped forward, but I raised my hand. I wanted to hear him once, without lawyers translating us. "Melissa did most of the documents," he said. "I can cooperate. I can sell the company and pay you back. But if you push the criminal case, everything is gone." "I am not pushing a criminal case. The state is investigating what you did. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding." "Was it?" His face twisted. "I was desperate. So was I when your mother was dying. I did not steal from you. You had a pension. You had the house. I had employees and bills and a family. You had choices. Bankruptcy. Selling your truck. Closing the company. Telling me the truth. You would have said no. That was my right. His eyes filled with tears. I'm your son. The sentence reached every father I had ever been. I wanted to tell him we would fix it. I wanted to find the broken part, replace it, and send the machine back into service. But people are not machines, and love is not a tool for removing consequences. I know, I said. That is why this hurts. I still love you because I am your father, but I will not become the lie that keeps you from answering for what you did. He began to say something else. Nora signaled the deputy, and Jason was escorted away. Sophie joined me near the courthouse doors. Are you all right? No. She nodded as if that answer made sense. Me neither. We walked into the daylight together. The legal consequences unfolded over the next 8 months. Real life moved more slowly than a courtroom ruling. My bank recovered $61,000 from Jason's business and personal accounts. The rest became part of a restitution order. The moving company returned my furniture from storage, though several items were damaged. The coin collection was found in Melissa's brother's garage. Carol's ring had been sold to a dealer and could not be traced. I mourned that ring. Then Sophie and I visited the small jewelry shop where Carol and I had bought it. The original owner's daughter searched old sales books and found the design number. She could not reproduce the exact ring, but she made a simple pendant based on it using the tiny diamond from Carol's anniversary band, which had remained in a safe deposit box Jason never knew existed. I gave the pendant to Sophie at her nursing school graduation. This is not a replacement for what they took, I told her. It is something new, made honestly from what remained. She wore it beneath her uniform. Jason pleaded guilty to forgery, attempted theft through deception, and financial exploitation of an older adult. The prosecutor dismissed several additional counts in exchange for a full accounting and his testimony about Melissa's role. He received a 2-year sentence, with restitution and 3 years of supervision after release. Melissa pleaded guilty to identity fraud, theft, and falsifying a notarial act. She served 6 months in county custody, followed by home detention and probation. Hale Residential Solutions closed. The employees found other work or filed wage claims. It was painful. It was also not my fault. For the first 3 months, Jason's letters blamed me. He wrote about lost contracts, legal fees, and humiliation. I kept the letters but did not answer. The 4th letter contained one sentence I had waited years to hear. I knew you would say no, so I decided your no should not count. I visited him after that. We sat across from each other in a room of bolted chairs and vending machines. He looked thinner. There was gray in his beard. I read Mom's letter, he said. I had sent him a copy after his guilty plea. What did you hear? I asked. That I treated your life like the delay before mine started. I did not rescue him from the silence that followed. Can you forgive me? He asked. Forgiveness is not a door I walk through once. Some mornings I can see it. Other mornings I am back in that hospital looking at $40. Will we ever be a family again? We are a family now. Family is the reason the damage matters. What we may become depends on whether you can build a relationship that does not ask me to forget the truth. He nodded. It was not a reunion. It was not nothing. Eleanor converted Whitcomb Nursery into a non-profit land trust the following spring. The greenhouses continued selling plants, but profits funded transportation, legal clinics, and temporary cottages for older adults leaving hospitals without safe support. She named the program Second Porch because, she said, everyone deserved another place to sit while deciding what came next. She did not leave the land to me. I did not want it, and she knew that. A community board controlled the trust, with strict rules against private sale. She asked me to supervise vehicles and building maintenance 3 days a week. I accepted a salary after she threatened to report me for exploiting myself. I remained in my house for another year because the choice was mine. Sophie helped me repaint the den. We placed Carol's letter in a new fireproof safe and hung the graduation photograph Melissa had torn. The blue flower pot could not be repaired, so I set the pieces into wet cement and made a mosaic stepping stone for the rose bed. Eventually, I chose to sell. Not to a shell company, not at a discount, and not because anyone called me incapable. I obtained 2 appraisals, hired my own agent, and accepted an offer from a young couple who promised nothing except to care for the maple tree. I bought a smaller house 10 minutes from Sophie and 20 minutes from the nursery. When Jason was released, we began meeting once a month with a family counselor. He did not receive keys to my home, access to my accounts, or loans for a new business. We ate lunch. We talked about ordinary things. Trust returned in teaspoons, not buckets. Eleanor lived to 96. On the anniversary of the hospital day, we sat on the nursery porch with coffee. She had become smaller, but her eyes remained sharp. "You may stop pretending to be my grandson now," she said. "I stopped that after 90 seconds. Nonsense. You have been checking my gutters and criticizing my tires for 2 years. Your tires were dangerous, spoken like family." She reached over and covered my hand with hers. "Blood tells you where a person came from," she said. "Loyalty tells you where they chose to stand." Eleanor died peacefully that winter after eating breakfast and correcting 3 mistakes in the nursery accounts. The funeral filled the largest greenhouse. Grant did not attend. Jason did, standing quietly near the back. Sophie wore Carol's pendant. I placed Eleanor's black cane beside the memorial table, not as a symbol of weakness, but as the instrument she had used to tap impatiently whenever the world underestimated her. Second porch continued. The 220s Jason left at the hospital remained in my wallet until the day St. Catherine called our program about a 70-year-old man discharged after pneumonia. His daughter had promised to collect him, then stopped answering. He had $23 in slippers that were too thin for the snow. I drove the nursery van to the hospital. He sat in the same discharge corridor where I had met Eleanor. When I introduced myself, he looked away and said, "I can pay for gas." I knew the shame in his voice. "The ride is already paid for," I told him. "By who?" I took the 220s from my wallet and placed them in the small donation envelope attached to the driver's log. "By somebody who once thought $40 was enough to leave a man alone," I said. "It wasn't. But it is enough to begin bringing one home." I helped him into the van. Before closing the door, I looked down the corridor and could almost see a 94-year-old woman in a plaid coat, hands resting on a black cane, inventing a grandson because she needed the world to behave differently for 90 seconds. She had offered me a ride. She had given me something larger, proof that abandonment was an event, not an identity. My son left me at a hospital with $40. He believed that made me helpless. What he did not understand was that losing the person I depended on forced me to see every person he had taught me not to trust. My granddaughter, a stranger, a lawyer, a doctor, and finally myself. I started the engine. The heater filled the van with warm air. The man beside me held his discharge envelope tightly, still uncertain where he belonged. "Ready?" I asked. He nodded. This time, no one went home alone.